I got convinced that rail has to be the backbone of transportation. Electric cars are great, but if we have one electric car per person, that's not going to scale. The need on minerals, energy, and so much is going to be too high. If cars become autonomous, which is on its way, and trains are not, then it's going to be really hard for them to compete. For a train, you're saving 500,000 euros per train that you automate. I came to the conclusion that if I wanted to have more impact, I needed to make my job. Our vision is that in 2045, everybody should be within 10 minutes of a station where there's a train at least every half hour.
Hey Alex, I'm super excited about this conversation. You're the co-founder and CEO of Futurail. You're bringing autonomy to the rail industry. You worked at Tesla and you then led the autonomous division at Audi. But let's start with why you decided to create Futurail and why is it so important to bring autonomy to the rail industry?
Yeah, hi Antonin, thanks. For me, it all started with I've been tracking my footprint for a couple of years and made great progress, but at some point I plateaued. And so I came to the conclusion that if I wanted to have more impact, I needed to make my job. That just doing my part at home was not enough. So I left my well-paid job in the Volkswagen Group at Argo AI and looked at different things and especially focused on transportation and basically came to the conclusion that for a sustainable transportation, we need to put more people per vehicle. Electric cars are great, but if we have one electric car per person, that's not going to scale. The need on minerals, energy, and so much is going to be too high. So we need some sort of public transportation. And rail is just great for this because the steel wheel on steel rail contact make it very efficient. So you need much less energy, 3 times less energy. And it's also much easier to electrify. So I got convinced that rail has to be the backbone of transportation. And then when you look at, okay, what can we do to make rail more attractive so that more people drive or take the train instead of driving, or more freight is moved by train, then autonomy stands out as a great opportunity. First, to address driver shortage, but then also to reduce cost, to increase reliability, increase flex, lower energy consumptions, many benefits. And the other way to look at it is like if cars become autonomous, which is on its way, and trains are not, then it's going to be really hard for them to compete.
Sorry. When you say cars are becoming autonomous, you're referring to the rollout of robotaxis by Tesla and Waymo in Silicon Valley?
Mostly Waymo, yeah. I think Tesla, we still have to see. It's a great driver assistance. We have to see exactly how good it is as an autonomous cars. But Waymo robotaxi are a reality in multiple cities and deploying more. So that's coming. I think there's still some question on the scale at which it's coming. I think they've proven that the technology is there, at least for American cities with fairly large streets. But it's clear that it's feasible, that they've proven that it's feasible, and now they need to find the right economical equation, making sure it's a profitable deployment. I think in Europe, it may be a little bit more challenging because dense European city centers are more difficult for, I think even just for humans in general, like driving in Paris is pretty tough. So for machines, it's going to be even harder, but they will probably come also at one point.
And will they come to rural areas as well?
Never say never, but for sure not at the beginning, because rural areas, they combine the high speed that you can find on highway and the unprotected circulation that you have in the cities, right? So cities are easier because the speed are lower, and highway are easier because it's a very structured driving. Everybody stays in this lane, go in the same direction. There's no crossing and so on. And rural just have the worst of the two worlds. So they're going to be the last one to come. And then the business case also is not as interesting because there it's kind of hard to compete with personal owned cars.
So before co-founding Futurail, you actually worked on autonomous cars for, 10 years?
Almost, yeah.
And what did you learn about the economic equation of autonomous cars, and how did you decide to make the switch toward autonomous trains?
Yep. To be fair, the economics of robotaxi is actually not that great because hardware is still expensive and drivers, especially Uber drivers, are unfortunately pretty cheap. And And then a taxi doesn't drive that much during the week. And so that's the opposite on trains, right? So trains, they drive like typically 15 hours a day, 7 days a week. Train drivers are super expensive. It's a 1-year training and permanent retraining, and they have some limit about how much they can drive. They have other tasks to do. So all in all, for a train, you're saving 500,000 euros per train that you automate, where the sensor set is, I don't know, a few tens of euros. So the return on investment is really interesting. The unit economics is really good for trains.
And how long did it take you to realize this? When you were still working at Audi, or?
No, it's actually afterwards. It's when I looked at how to make trains more attractive that I started digging into the system, and that was kind of a aha moment. But because obviously the market for trains is smaller than for cars. There's fewer trains than cars, but the value creation is actually very comparable because per train you create much more value than per car.
And where are you going to start? Will you start with trains in rural areas, with high-speed trains?
Yeah, very good question. So actually one of my learnings also from Robotaxi is that if you're Google and have tens of billions to spend and can wait 15 years, then it's okay to go for the biggest market first. But for most other mortals or common companies, it's probably a good idea to have a more thought-through, step-by-step approach, targeting a first segment that is easy enough that you can get there in a couple of years, but also big enough that you can make a living out of it. And so for us, the progression is start first in what's called depot automation. So depot are typically end station or places where you store the train, where you wash the train, when you charge when it's a battery electric train, do the maintenance, so on and so on. So these are movements below 30 kilometers per hour without passengers on board and in a semi-controlled environment. So that's the first step, and that can easily represent 20 to 30% of the time of a driver. So that's already a big saving. Then the next step is to go to secondary lines or small regional lines, or sometimes also called branch lines or short lines. And then especially in Europe, there's a lot of interest in revitalizing the small lines, where today either they're closed or they're thinking about closing it, or they keep it alive with 3 trains a day, so really poor service. Now, if you have autonomous trains, you can offer basically hourly or bi-hourly service even on small villages, and that's a completely different service than if you have 3 trains.
And don't you need smaller trains then?
For these lines, then it doesn't make sense to have a big train to carry, a couple of dozens of passengers. And so here we're working with Lohr Industry in eastern France, who's building a battery-powered 30-seat train for SNCF for the small lines in France, and we're providing the autonomy for that train.
So I come from the Vosges in France, the northeast of France.
Yes.
There's actually a line I remember from Épinal to Saint-Dié. It's about 60 kilometers.
Yeah, that would be a perfect example. Yeah.
And so how many lines like this one are we talking about?
Yeah, there's close to 100 lines like this in France alone that could be equipped. So there's potential for hundreds of trains just in France. And then the goal is to go beyond France to also, like every country. Germany has similar problems, Italy, Spain, they all have small lines that can use this kind of trains and that kind of technology.
And how far are we from this to become a reality?
This is supposed to launch in 2028. So in 2028, it's going to be just a depot automation, but the train is going to be built with all the sensors and the computers to be able to go up to 100 kilometers per hour. That's going to come a few years later once we get additional testing and homologation for that function.
And so you're already in conversation with companies like SNCF? How advanced are you from actually equipping the trains?
The design is complete, and now the first train is being built, and testing will happen next year, and then homologation the year after to be ready for commercial service in 2028.
And those conversations are easy? Do you feel like they deeply understand what you guys are trying to build? They understand the economics? They feel like the incentives? Because one could think that because you will not rely on drivers anymore, like the set of incentives is a bit Like I see the positive side, but I also see the negative side.
There's no one answer. Like it depends on who you talk to. So it's not like the whole company is completely aligned as like this is what we need to do. There's some people that think like, well, this is never going to come. It's too complicated. It has too many problems, and so on. And there's some other problem that look at it as like, well, that's the future, and see it that also technology is proven in the US and in China and. Then the other part also, you show the numbers, right? I mean, you look at a classical train on the small lines, the cost. Then you use light trains, which already make it lower cost, and then you look at driverless light trains, and then it's half the cost of what it costs today. So that's a huge difference, right? So if you talk to the transport authority, there's like, oh wow, this is something we need. And then obviously the operator that comes with such a solution is pretty much guaranteed to win the tender because they have a much more attractive cost structure.
And also because there's an actual shortage of drivers.
Absolutely, yeah. There's a shortage of driver.
Why is there a shortage of drivers? Because nobody wants to be a train driver anymore? It's not attractive enough?
Yeah, exactly. It's the kind of job you alone in your cabin the whole day. You have to wake up early in the morning to pick up the train, go out in the cold in the winter, or come back late at night. And then in general, also, I think the bigger picture is not specific to this industry. I think we hear about labor shortage in many industries. I mean, if you look at the demographic, it's just there's fewer and fewer people. And I mean, for the last 40 years, the discussions have all been about we need more jobs. But now I think people are realizing that it's not about jobs, it's about workers. And I think automation is the future. If you look at, I think France has been maybe a little bit behind, but in a good sense that we had less fertility problems than other countries. But if you look in Germany or Japan, right, I mean, they've been talking about robots and automation for the last 20 years because their population has started declining sooner. And so we have to automate what we can automate. And that's one job that's easier to automate compared, for example, to, I don't know, a nurse or a service person or where you need to interact with other humans. I think we should keep the humans for that part where the human actually bring something more than the machine. Yeah.
And so in those transportation companies, the conversations you have is with which kind of personnel usually?
Like at the operator, the rolling stock department, and also at the manufacturer, we start having discussion also with the product line people.
And how advanced are those conversations at the moment? Like
depends. We have a whole pipeline of conversation at different stages. With Lore, we have a signed contract. Also,
so Lore is
a manufacturer. It's a mid-sized company. There are 2,000 people.
And they're based in France?
Yeah, in Alsace, in eastern France.
And they manufacture trains for like SNCF?
Yeah, I mean, they've done other type of vehicles. They have one product in freight train, and that's now their first product in passenger train, but they've done other passengers vehicles.
So with them, you already have a pilot? You're working on a...
Yeah, we're working on the integration on the real product, actually, yeah.
And with other manufacturers in Europe?
Yeah, with other manufacturers in Europe, but that's we are at like the proof of concept stage. I mean, depending, some like are in the proof of concept, other are in the earlier discussions, but we're talking to all of them.
Let's go back to your time at Audi. Back then, you were the CTO of the robotic division. When you decide to quit, how long do you spend before deciding to found Futurail? And what was happening through your head at that time?
So I left without knowing what I was going to do next. I figured that I'm at a stage in my life where I can afford to be some months without a salary. So it took me, actually, I converged fairly quickly on the idea of doing autonomous trains, maybe 2-3 months. And
do you remember how you reached that conclusion?
Well, so if you really want to know, I mean, I started like as an engineer, very methodically, like where are the emissions in the world for each industry, what could be done to remove the most carbon, and as a way to compare them, as like what would it take to remove 10 million tons of carbon per year, of CO2 per year. Just how many electric cars you need to have, how many kilogram of meat, how many solar panels, how many whatever heat pumps. And just to have an order of magnitude of what it is, and also to set an ambitious goal to myself and kind of remove the small things that are cool and fun but don't really have an impact or don't scale to something meaningful. That's how I started. So with my table, and then looked at different things, and I wanted to do something also that involves both hardware and software, because my entire life has been in robotics, and I've always enjoyed the combination of software and hardware. I like to say the power of software, but applied to the physical world of hardware. And also because I think if you really want to have an impact, you need to touch the hardware. Like you can do a lot of things in software, but at some point the impact is happening in the physical world. And I think at the beginning I rather really not limit myself, and so that's why I looked at everything. But then also the reality kicks in. It's like, where do I have experience? Where can I bring something? And I talked to some like wood construction startup. But here, like really, I would have to learn everything. Whereas if I stay in transportation, and especially in autonomy, then I would like really bring experience that others may not have. So that's how I converged. And then, but then there was still a long phase of like putting together the business plan, and the team was a big thing. So I participated in a startup accelerator in Cambridge, UK. And that helped me refine my idea and meet a first potential co-founder, but turns out it didn't work out at the end. But also at the same time met another potential co-founder.
But you already knew you would work on trains then?
So it was, becoming clearer and clearer over time. Like I had this idea, but then we're still open to other ideas and talking to some people, and then, trying to write I wrote a master plan at some point of what autonomous trains would do.
Well, you were trained at Tesla, so you know about master plans.
Exactly, yeah. But I like the idea that you write down your vision and the long term, and then use that to clarify where you're going. But definitely finding the right co-founder was a journey. Met some great people, but the second co-founder, we worked really well together. But when it was time to incorporate the company and put the money in the bank account, then he was like, maybe I'm not sure I want to do this. And I have to say, like, being alone is really hard. When you have to carry everything by yourself, this was a hard time. And then, so I still keep going, looking for co-founders.
What made you persist back then? You remember times where you were about to quit, or?
Yeah, definitely, yeah. I think that's one of my strengths and weakness sometimes, is that I'm just really bad at turning back. It's just when I've decided something or I go something, it's hard for me to change, and which often can be a strength and sometimes can be like, you should have turned back sooner. But there's definitely been times where...
And you were looking for a technical co-founder, or more like...
In theory, more...
go-to-market?
More, business co-founder. And I talked to a couple of people. But so what happened is I still kept going and started hiring first employees. And then Patrick was actually my first employee. We've worked together at Argo. He's younger than me, but I guess also more like hands-on technical. Like I'm an engineer, but I have been writing code for the last probably 10 years now. And then, it turned out we just worked really well together, and he got involved also beyond the technical side. I mean, right, when you're a team of 3 at the beginning, like everybody has to do a bit of everything. And so he helped also with the pitch deck, with, all other things. And that's where I just realized, okay, he's actually like the person I need. I mean, in terms of soft skills also, right? I mean, the resilience is a big thing. Not taking no as an answer. Resourcefulness, right? When something doesn't work, like just come up with another idea. It's like, if it doesn't work, I'm going to do this way or that way. Or, keep trying and never give up.
And when did you realize he was the right one?
So he started in July, and we had a discussion in November, I think, or October, November. Yeah, so fairly quickly, I'd say. And then made him a co-founder. It was clear also that 2 people with more technical background, we needed really someone with a strong business background. And so together we started looking also for a third co-founder, and that's how we found Max, our chief commercial officer and third co-founder, who joined in July, so a year later. And And then started as chief commercial officer, and then also after 6 months we realized, or we confirmed that it was really the three of us running the company, that we were working really well together, and so he became also the third co-founder, and that's been working really well.
And they are German. The company is based in Munich. Most of the
Yeah, so Patrick and Max are German. Most of our team is in Munich, Germany. The company is headquartered in Strasbourg, because from the beginning we had the vision that we wanted to be a European company, and especially like a French-German company, because these are the two biggest markets in Europe, and especially for rail, the two big leaders. And so we want to anchor ourselves, be national or European from the beginning.
And so you're currently closing a round with Asterion and other co-investors. Can you mention them?
Yes. So we just raised 5.5 million with co-leads being Asterion and Leap for 35 in Germany, and also participation of EIT Urban Mobility in Europe, and the Zero Infinity partner in New York, and Heroic Venture on the West Coast.
And how many employees are there? What kind of...
We're 15 people now, and keep growing.
Mostly technical?
Mostly technical, yeah. There were like 3 non-technical people, and then technical, mostly software, and 1 hardware, 1 safety person.
And are you still hiring?
Of course, yeah, more than ever. So yeah, if anyone listening is interested,
what kind of?
So a lot of software, AI, robotics, but also safety, and we're looking for 1 person in business development as well.
It must be a tough market right now.
It is, a lot of competition, but
the fact that you're a European company trying to solve a unique challenge for Europe, is it like appealing for?
Definitely, I think that's one of the things that help us attract people is our mission. We have a very clear mission, and a mission that speaks to a lot of people. There's obviously the environmental impact of what we're doing, but as you mentioned, also the made in Europe impact, and even more than just the made in Europe is like autonomy for cars is unlikely to happen in Europe, but for trains, the rail industry, the European rail industry is really leading in the world, and so here there's really an opportunity for the rail industry to be the leading continent in autonomy for rail, right? So that's really a market where Europe can dominate autonomy. Like
a laboratory for autonomous trains.
Yeah, and more than a laboratory, then like a big market and a big exporter, right? A big mastering of the technology.
The thing is, there are already autonomous trains, like in the metro in Paris, the line 14, for instance, is super well known for this.
So the big difference here is that metros are completely fenced and protected. So there's no sensors on board. There's no intelligence, like perception on board of the system. If you were to dig a tunnel to go into the metro pass, they wouldn't stop for you. Whereas we need to automate trains that go on the countryside, where it could be a cow on the track, or a fallen tree, or a car at level crossing, or anything, right? So we need a really performant perception system on the train.
And so in Asia, there are lots of trains as well. Do you have like competitors in China or?
Not directly. China is actually not too focused on autonomous trains. They're really focused on high-speed trains. I'm sure it will come at one point, but that's not the biggest focus at this point. It is a big market. It's difficult for a Western company to penetrate Chinese market. But we have a customer in Brazil, for example. We've been working in the US. India is going to come at one point as a big market as well, potentially Japan, Australia. So there's definitely other markets out there. But first, Europe, right? That's our number 1 focus. It's a home market. Here we need to be the best.
And do you have competitors in Europe?
There's a few, yeah. There's a company in Belgium. There's one in Israel. Then there's some equipment manufacturer that are trying to do this. And some OEMs also have some internal teams doing similar things.
What is the main technical challenge that you need to address?
The biggest part is what we call the perception, so monitoring the front of the train and ensure that there's no obstacle on the track. The biggest challenge here, and which makes it more difficult than cars, is that trains don't brake as well as cars. So the braking distance are longer, which means you need to see further out. And also because trains are on rail, there's things very close to the track. Just think of a platform, for example, or the side of a tunnel. It can be a few tens of centimeters from the side of the train. So which means hundreds meter down the track, you see something, you need to be able to tell plus or minus 10 centimeters, I'm going to hit it or not. So you need a really precise, accurate perception system, much more than for cars.
This is the main technical challenge, or are there others?
I think that's the biggest. And then there is a semi-technical challenge, which is the safety case. How do you demonstrate that your system is safe? That's still new, hasn't quite been done. I mean, it's been done to some extent in the US for self-driving cars, but not to the European standards. And so here it's about building an argumentation, demonstrating that your system is never going to fail and that your train is as safe as if it was driven by a human driver.
And how easy it is to demonstrate this?
To be honest, I think it's even more difficult than making the system work. But there's definitely ways to do it. It's going to rely on a lot of data showing that your system has been tested in enough cases, rely on simulation as well, and then demonstrating that the test set that you use is actually representative of the environment in which you're going to operate. That basically you've seen all of the scenarios that you could see. And I'd add here, train as an advantage compared to cars is because safety has been always very important in the industry, but also because it's only professional drivers. All incidents are well reported and well documented. So there's a very extensive database of the kind of accidents that happen. And so we can go through that and make sure that our system works in all these cases.
How many accidents happened in the last 20 years?
There's a lot of very benign accidents, right? Like hitting like a wild boar or something. You would never, read about it in the news. But it can damage the front of the train. It can delay the train a little bit. And sometimes...
And why wasn't the driver able to avoid it?
Yeah,
in those cases?
Because drivers has other things to do. Like sometimes they need to inform the passengers about what's going on, or they need to talk to the traffic control people, or there's a red light on the dashboard. They need to figure out what it is, or there's just other things to do. They cannot always be watching in the front. At night also it's difficult for a driver, or in bad weather. Here LiDAR, radar can definitely help with that. And just to answer your question, so there are more collisions than what you think. Typically, there is small collision every couple of hundreds of thousands of kilometers, which is still much better than cars, but more than what most people think. Yeah.
But most of them are benign.
Exactly. Yeah.
But when they're not benign,
then it can hurt. Yeah. The most dangerous thing is a truck stuck at a level crossing and the train arriving. That can derail the train and make some big damage.
And I imagine you're making the case that autonomy could be even more reliable than humans driving the train. Why are you so convinced that this is the case?
As I mentioned, for example, because at night and in bad weather, we have sensors that are just different than human eye.
There are more accidents happening at night than during the day right now?
Yes, there are, yeah. Yep.
So this could also make the case to have even more cars, even more trains working at night if autonomy is rolled out? Yeah,
potentially, yeah. I think trains are already considered very safe today, right? There's more accidents at night, but it's still few and much less than cars. So I think the system today is already pretty good, but this can make it even better.
What is the most difficult challenge? Is it regulatory, technical, business? And do you see it in a different fashion now than when you started 3 years ago?
Yeah, good question. I think they all have their own challenge, but if I had to order them, I would say technical is maybe the least challenging, or maybe where I'm the most confident. I think there are a lot of challenges, like how do you deal with dust or with bad weather, or with things close to the track, or vegetation. Also, I can think of a lot of corner cases that are not easy, but for all of them, I can right away think of solutions or things we could do. Then regulatory is probably the second one. Here we're starting with depot automation, where when you think about it, low speed, no people on board, not too much time pressure, so we can have some false positives. So we should be able to find a solution, and to some extent there's already like AGVs in factories or in ports that are similar, but it's like also some education with the regulatory body in the rail industry, and so I can see that it takes quite a bit of time and discussion.
It's an easy way to build trust with regulators.
You mean the first approach? Yeah, exactly. That's exactly our goal. Like start with an application that's simple, but show that it works end to end, that we can do the whole thing, the whole safety case, the whole testing, the whole validation.
So when you say depot, it means when the trains arrives at the station?
At the end station, yeah, exactly, yeah.
Then you need to bring the trains to the depot.
Yeah, and in this, on the small lines, the depot and the end station is pretty much the same thing, but it's like the track where you park the train or where you charge it or you do some maintenance. And then the last one is the business, where I think our customers are still debating how strategic this is for them or not, and so how much they're willing to buy it or to procure it versus do it in-house, and then also do they have the capability in doing in-house. So I think here there's still lots of discussion, and then there's also a bit of the rail industry is actually fairly segmented in terms of organization. So especially for regional transport, you have the transport authority, typically the regions, that say how much and what kind of trains they want. And there's an operator that operates them, who buys trains from a manufacturer, who buys equipment from an equipment manufacturer. And you may have services company also along the way. There's the infrastructure manager also, who's separate. So quite a different stakeholder that needs to come together, and everybody's a bit looking at everybody else. Okay, who wants to go first with autonomous trains?
So who is your actual client?
Our main customer is the train manufacturer, but we're also working with operators for retrofit.
Like Alstom.
Exactly, yeah. Alstom, Stadler, Siemens, CAF, Skoda, Lohr, PESA. There's quite a few, yeah.
And so you need to convince the regulators so that the manufacturers are more incentivized to buy your solution. How
and then the operators use it. Yeah,
triangle of stakeholders.
So the way we work is like we certify our product with some exported constraint that our customer, the train manufacturer, need to meet, and then the train manufacturer can go certify his train, showing the certification of our subcomponent subsystem.
And why do you think this is going to be the main challenge? You said because none of them actually has a strong incentive to be a pioneer, or? Yeah,
because they kind of looking like basically the transport authority is saying, oh, that would be great, but it's for the operators to propose something, and then the operators are like, this would be great, but we need something to buy, and then the manufacturers are like, well, we could work on it, but we need some order, some order from our customers. But I think that's often the case with new technology, right? That people don't fully realize the potential until they see it, until it's real, right? So that's why we're working hard on getting the first train, to drive autonomously in simple case with small trains on depot. And then I'm convinced that when people see it, it will change their mind. I remember at Tesla, the first time I saw Autopilot, that the car would drive itself without, holding the steering wheel, or even more impressive, the first time we had the summon function. If you know what it is, right? You're just outside of the car and you push a button and the cars just move at low speed but moves by itself, and just watching a car with no one inside and the steering wheel moving by itself, it's like mind-blowing. And that just, when you see it, it's just different than knowing it. And all of a sudden you start imagining tons of applications.
Perfect transition. Let's go back to your time at Tesla.
Yep.
How old were you when you started to work at Tesla?
Just before I was 39, I celebrate my 40s when I was at Tesla after 4 months at Tesla or something.
And before that, what did you do?
Robotics, industrial robotics for 15 years, working in a US robotics company, starting my own company in France, and working as a software engineer, as a manager, as a director, different roles.
And how did you join Tesla?
Yeah, because I was living in Silicon Valley, and I was at some point looking for a change, and then Tesla was building the Autopilot team, and through a connection I could reach out and self-driving cars are essentially robots on wheels. So there's a lot of what I've done before and learned that I could reuse in the Autopilot team.
And so back then, what was your exact role?
Started as a manager for the simulation team in the Autopilot, and then was a program manager for the entire Autopilot team.
So you were among the early pioneers at Tesla who worked on autonomy.
Yep. Yeah. I joined. I think they announced the hardware one like 2 weeks before I joined. So a few people had been working on this for maybe 6 months before I joined, but it was still like there was almost no features when I started, and then we progressively added features through over-the-air updates. First the ACC, then the big release was Autopilot in the summer of 2015, the first version of Autopilot. And then I led the Hardware 2 release in 2016.
And back then, did you feel that autonomy would become a reality just a few years after, or did you feel it was an impossible challenge?
No, to be honest, the timing, I wasn't necessarily too sure, but I was convinced that Tesla could be a place where it is solved because it was in Silicon Valley and had access to the right talent and the right mentality and the right approach to things. It had a very good engineering culture, and also because of the fleet that was already in the field, and so the data that we could collect, and the fact that having a product in the field, that's a big plus, right? Where you can get quick feedback from the field, from the customers, from even running in shadow mode in the fleet. That's very, very powerful.
And you were directly working with Elon Musk?
Yep. We had a weekly meeting with him, bi-weekly in crisis time, including weekends.
You had a lot of bi-weekly meetings?
Actually, yes. Probably half the time I was there was crisis mode. Yeah, maybe or a third of the time, but definitely, yeah, quite a bit of pressure and hard work time. Yeah.
And how was it?
Intense.
We want the stories.
Yeah. Well, there's lots of stories to be told, but if it's now most of them are in books, right? So if you read the biography, you will learn a lot. Yes, it was pretty intense. We used to say years at Tesla, you need to count like dog years multiplied by 7. So I spent 2 years there, but it felt like spending 14 years there, both because of, we're very productive and did a lot of things, but also a lot of pressure and a lot of hard work. But also very good learnings, like Elon. I guess everybody knows his personality now. He can be very hard, and it is hard. And I think that's not something I want to mimic in my companies. I want to build companies where we care more about the people, but care as much about the product and the technology and the mission, because these were true at Tesla. And one thing that I really admire with Elon is his ability to go down to first principle, like really boil down to the simplest ratio or elements in a problem. And I think that's very powerful. Allows him to detect bullshit pretty quickly. And
to always identify the bottleneck.
Exactly, yeah.
At a specific moment.
Yeah, and the fundamentals. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And I think that's something useful for every leader, every manager, being able to get down to the essence of things.
And is there something about Tesla's culture that you would like? What would you keep from Tesla's culture, and what would you not keep?
Yeah, so I would definitely keep the strong engineering culture that basically when I saw the Model S before joining Tesla, I was like, oh, this is a cool car. But when I saw it from the inside, after I joined Tesla, I was like, wow, this is a super well-engineered car. There's a lot of things that were just done very well. And as an engineer, like kind of beautifully done. And I think, good engineering, I think that's very something I believe in. The mission as well. I feel like most of my colleagues were at Tesla because they believed in the mission of reducing dependence on oil, reducing emissions of transportation. And I think that's very powerful, especially when you go through hard times. If you know why you're here, that gives you like really a lot of strength. So that's a big learning as well.
And what would you do?
What I do differently is I would definitely care more about the people, because it felt like people are just an interchangeable thing that you can throw away when it doesn't perform anymore. And I think here, there's a way to build a better culture where you care about people. And caring about people doesn't mean still mean you have high expectation and you're demanding. But there's the way of doing it that you do this because not you blame the person, but because you think the person can do more, and it would be better for the company and for the team.
There's this conversation right now about the fact that the Europeans work less than the Americans, and Tesla is well known for having super hardworking employees. Where you didn't mention the hardworking culture, what do you think about this?
Yeah, I mean, definitely at Tesla I was probably working 70 hours a week, maybe 75 in crisis time. I mean, I think definitely 35 or 40 is not enough, especially for a startup. But there's also an upper limit. I mean, depending on what you have to do, there's like if it's just repetitive work or something, you can do just hours. But at some point, if you need to do creative work or intellectual work, there's just a diminishing return. And I see for myself, I mean, I tend to work long weeks, but nowadays I'm more like 55, maybe 60 hours. Maybe 60 hours. And I think that's sustainable. But I do need a vacation, like every 3 to 4 months. I need to take a week off and unplug and think about something else, do something else. Or on the weekend, need to do something with my hands, with my kids, see people. I think it's a balance, and because at the end of the day, I think
the humans are building the robots.
Yeah, but I mean, what I want to say is, I think energy is more important than time. It's not there's how much time you have, but how much energy you have. I think is the most important thing. And when you work, you need to be working with full energy because you can be so much more efficient if you can make decisions like this, because you have the energy and you're not scared about the problems and you just tackle the problems, and problems come your way and you can easily take them, rather than if you're low energy and every bump is like a hard thing. Then
that was the main reason why you left Tesla?
No, I mean, I left because I had the opportunity with Audi, but I guess also because I still had a lot of energy at Tesla. It's just indeed like the hard working was wearing me out a little bit, and also kids were still small, and being able to spend a bit more time in the family. There was but I think the main reason is the lack of care for employees. I think that's the part that was worrying me the most. Yeah.
And then joining Audi, was it a big change?
Yeah, so the good thing is that we were in a separate company. So by design, right, because Audi was aware that if we were fully integrated in the company, it would be hard. So we had our own HR, our own IT, our own legal, our own purchasing. I mean, basically none of the support function from the mother company, so that we could build something like really adapted to software and robotics development. So that was great. But obviously, I had to interact with people at Audi, and then I have to say it was a bit of a shock at the beginning coming from Tesla and seeing how things are done at Audi, where much more was outsourced. It was much more about managing suppliers. I mean, finding the right suppliers, then writing specification, then giving it to suppliers, and then managing the suppliers.
It was slow? Yeah,
exactly. I think it's a great model for mature product. So that's why they're able to, do great cars. And when you look at what's in there, it's pretty affordable. But for innovation, that's not the best model because then you don't know exactly what to ask to your suppliers, and then the supplier doesn't really understand what you want, and so they build something, which is not what you wanted. And so the iteration cycle is just very slow. Whereas if you're all integrated, then the learning between what you need to do, how to do it can be much faster.
Does this make you concerned about the future of the German industry and the European industry?
I mean, I don't think that's specific to European industry. I think that's just specific to bigger companies which have been optimized for a certain type of business. And so when the business or the technology changes, it takes time to adapt. But I think also this is why startups are great, and that's why we need more startups, and that's why startup needs to work with corporates and corporates with startups, because I think it's a great model to do innovation, that you do the innovation in smaller, more nimble companies. And at some point, the two need to work together, and they need to figure out how to work together. But I think it can be beneficial to everyone.
And was it more generally a cultural shock to come back to Europe after 10 years in the Silicon Valley?
A little bit, but I also have to say that I can measure the change, or I can see the change from when I came back. Was it now almost 10 years ago? And now I feel like the startup ecosystem has evolved a lot. When we were trying to hire people in 2017, even though we were a daughter company of Audi, right, so pretty secured funding, a lot of people are like, but you're a startup, that's like an unsecured job. And it's like, no, I think I'll just go work for Audi. And you're like, come on, you're a software engineer, like software engineer in high demand on the market. We live in a country where there's good unemployment protection. Like worst case, like which is already unlikely, but worst case, the company goes under, you lose your job, you're probably going to find another one even before unemployment kicks in. So what's at risk for you, right? But it was just not in the mentality. But since then, I feel like a lot of things have changed. I have a lot of my former colleagues who have either started companies or have joined startups. I think now it's like I'll say much more cool to join a startup, and people understand the risk and also realize that the risk is not really financial. The risk is to work on something that goes to the trash. But that's the same risk in big companies. I mean, there's tons of projects that gets cancelled at big companies, right? I mean, when you do innovation, there's always like a high chance that your innovation doesn't work out, that the business doesn't work out, and that it's not there. But if you want to work on a successful innovation, you have to be ready to take a risk to work on an innovation that's not going to work.
Why is it so important to make small lines in rural areas more profitable or getting close to profitability?
Our vision is that in 2045, everybody should be within 10 minutes of a station where there's a train at least every half hour. And why is that important? Because if you look in Europe, or especially in France, like regions that are losing population, that are not as dense, it's today the offer of public transportation is quite poor and people feel abandoned. And if we can offer a reliable and good quality public transportation to these people, these are the ones that are less likely than to vote for populist and to be the people feeling left out of the current evolution of the society. So I think this serving this remote areas, or this less dense areas, I think is a better word, is very important in my view. And trains can help a lot with that. We still have many lines in these regions that can be used with a much better provide much better service.
You were born and raised in Alsace, and you're building a French and German company. How do you compare the two cultures when it comes to work? And would you say the company is more French or German right now?
Yes. So maybe I'll first say what's in common, and maybe one anecdote or one experience is when I went to the US for my master. That's where I realized actually what being European really meant, in the sense that even growing in Europe or in Alsace, Germans looked quite different than French. But once you go to the US and you meet Americans and then also Chinese and Indian and other people, that's where you realize actually how much in common we have between the Europeans. There was a European club at MIT, and just felt very close to a German, to a Spanish, to an Italian, Swedish people, that actually we had a lot to share.
So you not only grew up in Alsace, but you're also the son and the great son of professional brewers. The company is called Meteor. How long has it been running, and how did this shape your view and your entrepreneurial mindset, maybe?
Yep. Yeah, so the brewery has been around for almost 400 years now, and it's been in my family for 8 generation. My brother is the 8th generation. I grew up in the family, in the brewery, so it was my playground when I was a kid, and that's how I got passions for machines and things that moves and so on. But that's also where I learned about entrepreneurship and running a company. So now I support my brother as on the board.
Just give us a few figures about what is the business like.
It's about 300 people, 500,000 hectoliters, close to 100 million of turnover. That gives you an order of magnitude. So still like a family business, but bigger than a microbrewery.
What kind of job do you think your children will do in the future?
That's a very good question, because with all the AI talks, I think a lot of things are going to change. This being said, I'm an optimist, and I worked in robotics, which is about replacing jobs. And so I had, lots of opportunity to read and study about how technology actually doesn't take away jobs. There's the typical example that Germany and Japan for a long time were the country with the most robots and also with the lowest employment rate, because robots brings factories, which brings other jobs, and it's going to be the same for trains. Maybe there's going to be fewer drivers, but there's going to be more trains, and so more people to maintain the train, maintain the track, maintain the stations, and so on. And so I don't know what my kids are going to do, but I'm confident that they're going to have a job. It's going to be working with the machine, with the AI. I think that's another learning also from robotics and automation. Spending 25 years in it is that the best solutions are not the ones that are trying to remove the human completely, but are trying to make the human more efficient. And I think AI is going to be the same for quite a long time. So their job is going to be different than mine, but they're going to have a job.
They're going to have to learn AI.
Yeah, or to use AI for sure. Yeah, but the same way you had to learn to drive and to use, like all sorts of equipment that we have at home.
Thank you, Alex.